Before there were philosophers, there were questions. The world was alive with stories. Thunder was Zeus, the sea was Poseidon, the soul was whispered unseen. But curiosity stirred. On the coasts of Ionia, a few restless minds dared to ask, what if the world could be understood? Not through myth, but through reason. This quiet, dangerous question was the spark that became philosophy. The first thinkers, whom we now call the Presocratics, dared to explain reality without gods. They sought the arch, the hidden principle beneath all things. Not stories, but laws. Not myth, but reason. Their world was the cradle of science, physics, and metaphysics, still unborn, trembling with possibility. Thales of Miletus looked at water and saw in it the origin of life, a substance that flows, transforms, nourishes. But it was not his answer that made him a philosopher. It was his method. He replaced myth with observation, belief with reason. In every drop of water, he saw a principle that the cosmos could be understood through careful attention and reflection. He taught that wisdom begins not in answers, but in the courage to ask the right questions. Anaximander went further. He imagined that all things arose from the apeiron, the infinite, the boundless. Not air, not fire, not water, but a reality beyond what the senses could touch, from which the cosmos emerged and to which it must return. Here was the first step toward abstraction, toward the idea that there are truths our eyes cannot see, but reason can grasp, planted the seed of science itself, that reality might have a hidden order, discoverable through thought and reflection. Then came Anaximander, who saw air as the breath of all existence. Rarefied into fire, condensed into stone, he traced transformation not in story, but in observation. Nature, he proposed, could explain itself. Here, theory met evidence, speculation met pattern. The human mind realized it could reach beyond the mythic veil. South in Italy, another kind of revelation took shape. Pythagoras heard harmony not only in music, but in the structure of the world. Number was the secret language of the cosmos, each tone, each planet, each life vibrating to hidden ratios. To live rightly, he taught, is to tune the soul to that divine order. He glimpsed a cosmos where mathematics and morality intertwined, where the eternal patterns of numbers shaped both the heavens and human behavior. It was not mere calculation. It was the poetry of existence revealed through logic. Then came Xenophanes, who laughed at the gods of Olympus. If oxen had gods, he said, they would look like oxen. He saw divinity not in human form, but in unity itself, a single eternal being. Beyond likeness, beyond limit. His mockery of myth became a hymn to reason, challenging the arrogance of human projection and insisting that the divine is something more abstract, more rational, more infinite than human imagination could craft. Heraclitus saw the world as flame, forever living, forever dying. Change, he said, is the only constant. Conflict births harmony, and everything flows. Into the same river, he wrote, we step and do not step. Every moment is new, every identity provisional, every understanding incomplete. But Parmenides of Ionia saw something else. To him, change was illusion. Reality, he said, is one, eternal, unchanging. To trust the senses is to be deceived. True being cannot come and go. It simply is. Between Heraclitus' fire and Parmenides' stillness, Western metaphysics was born. Zeno, Parmenides' student, sharpened reason into paradox, proving that even motion defied logic. Empedocles merged these visions, arguing the world was made of four eternal elements, bound by love, divided by strife. Anaxagoras then added nous, mind, as the ordering force of the cosmos. And finally, Leucippus and Democritus broke the world into atoms, indivisible, eternal, dancing in the void. Pause for a moment and consider. How could human minds, without laboratories, without microscopes, without modern tools, imagine atoms, or conceive of mind as the principle ordering the cosmos? Here, in Ionia and southern Italy, philosophy was daring to do the impossible, to see the invisible, to reason beyond the senses, and to plant the seeds of science millennia before science itself would arise. It was a vision so bold it would sleep for centuries, waiting to awaken in modern thought. By the time philosophy reached Athens, thought shifted from the cosmos to human life. The sophists arrived, masters of speech and persuasion. They taught that truth is not universal, but human, shaped by culture, need, perspective. Morality, they claimed, was a convention. For the first time, philosophy asked not what the world is, but what we are. Then came Socrates. He owned nothing, wrote nothing, but changed everything. He walked the streets asking questions that cut like light. What is virtue? What is justice? What is the good life? His wisdom was to know he knew nothing. He lived by reason, died by conviction, and proved that philosophy was no longer only about the cosmos, but about the soul. Plato took Socrates' moral fire and built a world around it. He imagined two realms, the changing world we see and the eternal world of forms, the true. Unchanging realities our souls once knew. The philosopher, through reason, remembers these truths. In the Republic, he envisioned a state guided by wisdom, ruled by philosopher kings. His academy echoed through centuries, the first great home of philosophy. Plato's student, Aristotle, looked not upward, but around. He studied life, motion, ethics, logic. He sought not perfect forms, but purposes, final causes in every living thing. Virtue, he taught, lies in balance. Reason is the soul's compass. For 2,000 years, his thought would shape the Western mind. After Aristotle, philosophy became a way of life. Cynicism stripped away society's illusions, teaching freedom through simplicity. Epicureanism sought happiness through tranquility, freeing humanity from fear of gods, of death, of desire itself. Stoicism proclaimed virtue as harmony with reason and nature, teaching serenity through acceptance rather than escape. Scepticism whispered doubt into certainty, showing that peace arises from suspending judgment, that not knowing can itself be wisdom. And finally, Neoplatonism rose from Rome's fading light, a vision of reality flowing from a single, ineffable source, the One. All existence, all thought, all soul, descended like light from a hidden sun, and all yearned to return. Philosophy had turned mystical, a final hymn to the divine before faith would overtake reason. From the murmurs of Ionia to the echoing halls of Athens and Rome, philosophy was born not only from wonder, but from the restless human spirit. It began with water and fire, with atoms and forms. But what it discovered was far greater, the mind awakening to itself, the first breath of reason across a world once ruled by myth. When the ancient world fell, philosophy did not vanish. It withdrew into silence, into cloisters, where thought became an act of devotion. The temples of Athens were gone, the libraries burned. Yet in the darkness the question endured, can reason survive under the light of faith? Thus began the long night of medieval philosophy, a dance between revelation and inquiry. For 1,000 years, the human mind sought to reconcile to masters, God and truth. Philosophy became the handmaiden of theology, yet within those sacred walls, reason still whispered its quiet defiance. Augustine of Hippo, once a restless soul wandering through Manichaean beliefs, found peace in the inward journey of the mind. He taught that evil is not a thing in itself, but the absence of good, a shadow cast by the misuse of freedom. Time itself, he argued, exists only in the mind, in memory, perception, and anticipation. Beyond it, God dwells in an eternal present where past and future collapse into perfection. For Augustine, the stars above, or the body below, were secondary. Truth resides in the soul, in the turning of the mind toward God. Then came Boethius. Imprisoned and awaiting death, facing the cruel turn of fortune, he found consolation not in prayer alone, but in philosophy personified, a feminine guide who reminded him that fortune is a wheel, spinning endlessly between joy and despair. He wrestled with the eternal question, if God knows everything, do we still have freedom? His answer became a cornerstone of Western thought. Divine knowledge and human choice coexist in a profound, mysterious harmony. Here was philosophy as both refuge and liberation, a hand stretched across the abyss. As Europe rebuilt from the ruins of empire, philosophy moved into cathedrals and universities. Anselm declared, "I believe so that I may understand." Faith was the starting point, but reason proved that belief was not blind. From his mind arose the audacious ontological argument. that the very idea of a perfect being demands that such a being must exist. Then came Peter Abelard, brilliant, defiant, scandalous. He dissected language and logic with surgical precision. To him, morality was not about outcomes, but the intention behind the act. He loved passionately, thought dangerously, paid dearly for both, showing that intellect and heart can be both a gift and a peril. It was Thomas Aquinas, however, who built the cathedral of thought itself. Drawing upon Aristotle, he united reason and revelation into a grand, coherent system. Faith and reason, he said, are not rivals but roads to the same truth. The world for Aquinas was rationally ordered, each thing with purpose, every motion guided by meaning. He offered proofs for God grounded not in scripture but in the logic of nature itself. Thomson became the intellectual backbone of Christian philosophy, shaping centuries of thought. Yet even as Aquinas erected these towering structures, others began to challenge the old order. Roger Bacon called for experiment, not argument, learning by observing the world, not quoting authorities. Duns Scotus emphasized individuality, each being is unique, an irreducible spark in creation. And William of Ockham wielded his famous razor, do not multiply entities beyond necessity. He stripped away metaphysical excess, arguing that only particulars exist, a simplicity that would later fuel the rise of science. Pause for a moment. Imagine the clash of voices in these halls. Faith and reason in dialogue, questioning, sparring. Could the eternal God truly allow human freedom? Could observation surpass scripture? This tension, the search for truth within constraint, set the stage for the greatest intellectual rebirth the world had ever known. The seeds of Renaissance curiosity were being sown. By the late Middle Ages, faith still ruled the heart, but reason had found its wings. The rediscovery of Greek texts, the birth of universities, the restless curiosity of the human spirit, all were preparing for a new dawn. After centuries devoted to the divine, the gaze of philosophy turned back to earth, to the human being. It was the Renaissance, a rebirth of wonder, art, and confidence in the mind. Philosophy was no longer only about God. It was about humanity, our dignity, creativity, and the power to understand. Humanism emerged as its heartbeat. Thinkers turned to classical texts, not as relics but as living voices, guiding ethical and civic life. Philosophy became education, art, and a blueprint for society. Machiavelli, walking the tense streets of Florence, wrote not of saints, but of princes. He separated politics from morality, showing power as it truly is, raw, fragile, human. Leadership, he argued, is not purity, but skill. The preservation of order sometimes demands choosing necessity over virtue. Was realism stripped of illusion, the birth of modern political thought. At the same time, ancient Platonism returned in new light. Marsilio Ficino saw love and beauty as pathways to the divine, a ladder by which the soul could ascend toward the one. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola proclaimed the dignity of man, that humanity, unlike angels or beasts, is free to become whatever it chooses. Erasmus blended faith with wit, advocating moral reform through reason rather than war. Thomas More dreamed of utopia, a society built on justice and rational order. And Montaigne, in his quiet tower, turned inward, inventing the essay to explore the question, what does it mean simply to be human? Giordano Bruno, gazing at the heavens, saw infinity, a universe of countless worlds. For this vision, he was burned alive, yet his ideas set fire to the modern imagination. The Renaissance rekindled the human spirit, showing that reason and creativity could coexist with faith, shaping a world where humanity itself was once again a subject of wonder. By the end of the Renaissance, philosophy had broken free from its chains. It no longer served only the church, but the human mind. It had rediscovered curiosity, and with it, the courage to question everything. Faith gave meaning. Reason reclaimed wonder. Across this bridge from God to man, the modern world began to walk. The 17th century begins not with devotion, but with thunder. The cosmos, once enclosed in perfect spheres, cracks open. Numbers replace myth. Telescopes reveal motion where stillness was assumed. In that fracture, a new harmony is sought, a universe intelligible, lawful, radiant with understanding. Imagine a man standing before the ruins of centuries of scholastic argument, all words, no world. Francis Bacon sees that the wisdom of the ancients, though vast, has grown brittle, locked in disputation and reverence, blind to the living earth. He dreams of a new way to know, not through endless debate, but through observation. With patient attention, he watches nature, the flight of birds, the swelling of rivers, the hidden habits of plants. He gathers facts quietly, humbly listening before speaking, and in this practice he discovers induction. The ascent from experience to law, from particular observation to general understanding. No longer must truth be inherited, we can see for ourselves. The scientific spirit is born, not arrogance, but reverence for what is real. Knowledge becomes power, yes, but also liberation, a way to serve humanity by understanding and mastering its world. Bacon teaches us something timeless. Truth is patient, but its reward is boundless. Yet amid this new freedom, a deeper anxiety stirs. If we cast off every authority, what can we trust? If even the senses deceive, what remains certain? René Descartes sits alone, doubting all that can be doubted. In the silence, a spark arises. I think, therefore I am. From this indestructible certainty, thought itself, he constructs a universe of reason. Mind and body, soul and matter, each distinct, yet linked through a rational God. The world becomes a mechanism. The body, a clock. The mind, the observer, seeking meaning amid motion and cause. God is no longer distant or capricious. He is the guarantor of truth. Philosophy has shifted. Clarity now replaces faith, and reason becomes a form of prayer. Descartes teaches that certainty is built step by step, a scaffolding of the mind reaching toward the infinite. In the echo of this rational cosmos, another voice emerges. Thomas Hobbes sees humanity not as angelic or divine, but as moving bodies, mechanisms of desire, fear, and survival. Life in its natural state, he argues, is chaos, a storm where every man is against every man. To escape this, we forge a pact, surrendering a measure of freedom for safety. We erect the state as a leviathan, a towering structure holding human violence at bay. Here, the sacred becomes civic, politics becomes physics. Power is motion and restraint. Morality, a human invention to maintain peace. Hobbes redirects philosophy from the heavens to the city, showing that understanding humanity requires as much rigor as understanding nature itself. But what of the mind itself? What is the source of knowledge, if not revelation, or innate ideas? John Locke answers with radical simplicity. The mind at birth is a blank slate, tabula rasa. Experience inscribes upon it all that we know. Through sensation, we meet the world. Through reflection, we know ourselves. All belief, laws of nature, God, morality, is written by experience. Freedom is reimagined. Government exists not by divine right, but by consent. Rights are inherent, not granted. The philosophy of knowledge becomes the philosophy of liberty. Yet if knowledge comes from perception, what if perception itself is questioned? George Berkeley offers a gentle, radical thought. To be is to be perceived. Matter independent of mind is an illusion. A tree, a table, the universe itself exists only in the act of perception, sustained by God's infinite mind. To deny matter is not to deny reality. It is to render every experience sacred. The world is no longer a machine. It is a living thought in the mind of God. Then comes David Hume, the skeptic who dismantles reason itself. He asks, how do we know cause follows effect, that the sun will rise tomorrow, that the self exists as we imagine it? He finds no certainty in logic, only habit. We do not know the world, we believe it. Yet in this fragility lies wisdom. The mind is not a mirror of truth, but a theater of impressions. The stories we tell ourselves shape the world we inhabit. Hume exposes the limits of reason, but in doing so offers a deeper honesty about human knowledge. Across the continent, Baruch Spinoza speaks with serene mathematical clarity. He sees not God above the world, but God as the world itself. Every leaf, every thought, every planet is a mode of one substance, nature itself. Freedom is not the escape from necessity, but the peace of understanding it. Emotions transform into reason, suffering into insight. To know the laws of nature is to participate in divinity. Spinoza builds not theology, but a geometry of being, and from this, a new kind of serenity is born. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz imagines the universe as a symphony of monads, each a point of consciousness reflecting the whole. In this infinite harmony, all is preordained. No discord exists, only misunderstanding. Though the world may wound us, it is, in its divine precision, the best of all possible worlds. Here, reason and faith reconcile once more, a luminous harmony before skepticism reasserts its challenge. From these voices rises a chorus, calling themselves philosophers, reformers, citizens of the world. They write not in Latin cloisters, but in cafes, salons, and pamphlets. Knowledge becomes revolution, reason becomes a right. Ignorance, the last tyranny, must be overthrown. They build encyclopedias to gather all human wisdom, demanding that no truth is sacred except truth itself. Tolerance, progress, education, freedom, these are their banners. Pause. Look at the contrast. The mind, once bowed in devotion, now stands upright in inquiry. But a question stirs beneath this triumph. Can reason alone satisfy the human spirit? Can a world of light, logic, and knowledge fill the soul's longing for meaning? Or is there something beyond even the reach of reason, something the Enlightenment itself cannot illuminate? The mind has risen, yet the journey of philosophy continues. The 20th century was not a gentle turn of the calendar. It was a rupture in history, in art, in consciousness itself. 2 world wars shattered certainty. Science split the atom. Philosophy turned inward, questioning the very act of thought. From this restlessness, 2 great traditions arose. One analytic, seeking clarity through logic. The other continental, seeking meaning through existence and experience. Together, they became the twin lungs through which modern thought breathed. In the shadow of confusion and war, a new kind of philosopher arose, a thinker who trusted in reason more than revelation. They believed that, by cleaning the language of philosophy, they could clean the world of its errors. It begins with Gottlob Frege, a quiet German mathematician who dreamed that numbers and logic were one and the same. Frege built a new language for thought, a symbolic grammar so precise that it could capture the very structure of truth. He distinguished sense from reference, the idea a word carries and the thing it points to. A subtle distinction, yet revolutionary. Though few recognized him in his time, his logic became the seed from which modern philosophy would grow, a foundation for clarity, precision, and rigor. Then came Bertrand Russell, brilliant, restless, uncompromising. With Alfred North Whitehead, he attempted to rebuild mathematics from the ground up in Principia Mathematica. For Russell, clarity was as moral as intellectual, a rebellion against confusion, superstition, and tyranny. He showed that by analyzing language with precision, entire philosophical puzzles could dissolve. In politics, he fought for peace. In philosophy, for the purity of thought itself. Alongside him stood G.E. Moore, whose calm insistence on common sense grounded analytic philosophy in everyday reality. He argued that good cannot be defined by natural properties like pleasure or desire. It is simple and indefinable, recognized intuitively. Through Moore, philosophy remembered that truth often resides quietly in the world we inhabit. Then there was Ludwig Wittgenstein, a philosopher whose thought moved like music from silence to storm. In his early years, he believed that the structure of language mirrored the structure of the world. Words arranged with perfect logic could reveal the limits of reality. He wrote, "What can be said at all can be said clearly. What we cannot talk about, we must pass over in silence." But later, Wittgenstein overturned his own creation. He realized that language was not a mirror, but a living practice. Meaning comes from use, from the language games we play every day. A word's significance lies not in representation, but in how it functions within life itself. In one lifetime, Wittgenstein built and destroyed 2 of the greatest philosophies of the modern age. Around the same time, in the cafes of Vienna, a group of thinkers gathered, physicists, logicians, philosophers, united by a dream. They called themselves the Vienna Circle. Philosophy, they believed, should be as clear as science. Only statements that could be empirically verified or logically proven had meaning. All else, Metaphysics, theology, speculation was illusion. They pursued a philosophy of verification, precision, and intellectual purity. Yet in their zeal to remove nonsense, they risked removing wonder as well. Then came Karl Popper, who saw the flaw in their dream. Truth, he argued, is not built on verification, but on risk. A theory is scientific not because it can be proved, but because it can be disproved. Knowledge advances not through certainty, but through the courage to admit error. He called it falsifiability, a principle that turns science into a living conversation where every idea is open to challenge. Popper extended this vision to politics. Open societies, like open minds, thrive on critique and die in dogma. By mid-20th century, analytic philosophy turned to the everyday. Thinkers like Gilbert Ryle and J.L. Austin began listening to ordinary speech, to how people actually talk and act. Ryle mocked the Cartesian ghost in the machine, showing that mind and body are not two entities, but two ways of describing the same human in motion. Austin showed that words are not mere labels, but instruments of action. When we promise, apologize, or command, language does something. It shapes the world we inhabit. These discoveries brought philosophy closer to life, closer to the pulse of human interaction. Then came Willard Van Orman Quine, who unraveled the distinction between analytic and empirical truths. All knowledge, he argued, is part of a web, where beliefs are interconnected and tested as a whole. Truth is not a mirror of reality, but a network of beliefs that survive experience. Meaning is never fixed. It shifts within the web of human understanding. Through Quine, analytic philosophy rediscovered its humanity, the insight that logic and reason are embedded in the world they seek to describe. Consider this. In the relentless pursuit of clarity, we have stripped thought bare, analyzed the mind, and dissected language. But in doing so, have we understood what it means to exist? Can reason alone capture the richness of being, or is there a dimension of life it will always miss? The next voices in philosophy turn from clarity to the depths of consciousness itself, from the rules of thought to the question of being. Across the continent, another voice rises, poetic, historical, human. Where the analytic seeks precision, the continental seeks depth. It asks not just how we know, but what it means to exist. At its heart is Edmund Husserl, the founder of phenomenology, the study of consciousness as it appears in experience. He urges philosophy to return to the things themselves, suspending assumptions to describe reality as it is lived. Through Epish, Husserl seeks the structures of awareness that make all knowledge possible. Husserl's student Martin Heidegger transforms phenomenology into existential inquiry. He asks the oldest question anew: what does it mean to be? In Being in Time, Heidegger describes Dasein, human existence, as a being thrown into a world not of its choosing, haunted by time, shaped by care, and aware of death. Authenticity arises only when we face our finitude, when we stop fleeing the truth of mortality. Later, Heidegger turns to language and poetry, seeing words as the home of being itself, not logic or formulas. Then comes Jean-Paul Sartre, whose existentialism declares, existence precedes essence. We are not born with meaning, we create it through choices. Freedom is not a gift, it is a burden. We are condemned to be free, defining ourselves in a universe with no blueprint. Beside him, Simone de Beauvoir exposes the construction of womanhood as the other, a social invention, not biological fate. She calls for liberation through self-definition, through the courage to become one's own subject. Together, Sartre and de Beauvoir turn existentialism into a lived philosophy, a rebellion of meaning in an indifferent world. As the century progresses, language becomes the battlefield. Ferdinand de Saussure teaches that words gain meaning through difference, not essence. Later, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, and Roland Barthes push this to its limits. Meaning is never fixed, and every text conceals power. Derrida dismantles certainty. Foucault exposes the entanglement of knowledge and power. Post-structuralism teaches that to read the world is to unmask it, revealing fractures beneath its surface. Meanwhile, the Frankfurt School, Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, Herbert Marcuse, looks at the modern world and sees darkness. Reason, once liberating, has become a cage. Technology and media, once tools of progress, now control, desire, and thought. By blending Marx, Freud, and philosophy, they show how culture sustains domination, not by force, but by shaping wants. Their mission is not to destroy reason, but to redeem it. To awaken the possibility of freedom in a society that has forgotten how to think. The 20th century began under the shadow of war, disillusion, and rapid change. Philosophers turned inward, asking, not just how we know, but what it means to live. Maurice Merleau-Ponty explored the body as our primary way of being in the world. Consciousness is never abstract. It is embodied, shaped by perception, movement, and engagement with others. The mind and the world are inseparable. We inhabit existence not as observers, but as participants. Through perception, the world speaks. Through the body, we respond. Hannah Arendt, watching tyranny rise across Europe, asked how human beings can act and think responsibly in a world gone mad. She examined the public realm, the spaces of debate, and the dangers of the banality of evil, showing how ordinary minds can commit extraordinary wrongs. Philosophy, for her, is not only reflection, it is vigilance. It asks, how do we remain human when society itself seems to betray reason and morality? Pause again. Consider the trajectory of thought. From the pre-Socratics searching for hidden principles, to modern philosophers analyzing language and perception, we have sought certainty, meaning, and truth. Yet the closer we look at the mind, the body, the world, the more elusive certainty becomes. What happens when even our most trusted faculties, reason, language, perception, cannot anchor us? This is the threshold where postmodern philosophy takes over. In post-war Europe, thinkers began to see that knowledge itself is embedded in history and power. Claude Lévi-Strauss examined myths, discovering structures that shape human thought across cultures. Every story, every ritual reveals the hidden architecture of the mind, meaning he suggested emerges from patterns, not isolated facts. Michel Foucault took this further, showing that institutions, prisons, schools, hospitals, governments define what counts as truth. Knowledge is never neutral. It is a tool of control, governance, and social order. History itself becomes a battlefield. Ideas, not just armies, wield power. Jacques Derrida dismantled the very idea of fixed meaning. He revealed that texts contain contradictions, gaps, and infinite deferrals of sense. Every statement is haunted by what it omits. Philosophy, he argued, must confront its own structures, understanding that every system carries seeds of its undoing. Post-structuralism teaches us that certainty is a mirage, that the world is a living, shifting web of language, power, and interpretation. Across the Atlantic, the Frankfurt School reflects on the modern industrial world. Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, Herbert Marcuse, and others ask, why has reason, once liberating, become an instrument of domination? Technology and media, once symbols of progress, now manipulate desire and consent. Advertising, entertainment, bureaucracy, they shape not only behavior but thought itself. Critical theory blends Marx and Freud, showing how culture itself can suppress freedom without a whip or a prison. Yet their mission is not despair. It is redemption, to awaken the possibility of freedom in a society that has forgotten how to think. By the late 20th century, philosophy faces its own reflection. The grand narratives, progress, reason, universal truth, have fractured. Jean-François Lyotard declared that incredulity toward metanatives is the condition of modern thought. History, science, and morality are not unified stories. They are contested, plural, provisional. Truth becomes local, contingent, and negotiated. Richard Rorty emphasized that knowledge is conversation, not discovery. We cannot appeal to universal foundations. We create vocabularies that work, narratives that persuade, stories that sustain life. Philosophy, once a quest for certainty, becomes a practice of imaginative, pragmatic, and ethical storytelling. As thought becomes more fragmented, questions of responsibility intensify. Hannah Arendt's insight into the banality of evil echoes across continents. Levinas teaches that ethics begins with the face of the other, that human obligation is immediate, not abstract. In a globalized world, philosophy cannot remain solitary or detached. The challenges of climate, technology, war, and inequality demand a thinking that is practical, relational, and ethical. From the first flickers of reason in the minds of the pre-Socratics to the daring inquiries of modern and postmodern philosophers, we have traced a single thread: the human longing to understand. We have seen the mind reach toward the stars, the soul, the laws of nature, the limits of language, the depths of our own consciousness. We have glimpsed certainty, watched it fracture, and yet discovered meaning in the very act of searching. Philosophy teaches us that truth is not always a destination, but a journey, a conversation across centuries, across minds, across lives. It asks us to look closer, to think deeper, and to live with both humility and courage. And perhaps the greatest insight of all is this: the questions never end. Each answer opens a new horizon. Each reflection stirs another mystery. To engage with philosophy is to engage fully with life itself, in all its wonder, uncertainty, and possibility. So now the story turns to you. Which question resonates most in your own life? Where does your curiosity pull you? Share your thoughts, your doubts, your insights in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation together, because philosophy is not only something we read, it is something we live.